There's a quiet kind of person who feels most alive in the sanctuary of their own space. While others find energy in crowds and stimulation in constant movement, these individuals discover something precious in stillness. They're not hiding, they're not broken, they're not failing at life. They've simply learned that home is not a place to escape from, but a place to return to, a foundation from which everything else becomes possible. Watch them closely and a pattern emerges. They decline invitations not from fear, but from careful consideration of their energy reserves. They find Friday nights at home more restorative than Friday nights out. They've cultivated their living space into something more than four walls. It becomes extension of self, a carefully curated environment where they can finally exhale. To outsiders, this might look like isolation. To them, it's integration. The modern world measures vitality by visibility. The person always out, always social, always living their best life on social media, this becomes the gold standard. Against this backdrop, those who prefer staying home often find themselves defending a choice that needs no defense. They hear the concern in friends' voices. "Are you okay?" They sense the judgment disguised as worry. "You're always home." They absorb the cultural message that home-loving equals life-avoiding. But what looks like withdrawal is often the opposite. What appears as disconnection is actually a different kind of connection, one that prioritizes depth over breadth, quality over quantity, internal richness over external stimulation. The homebody has simply recognized something others haven't, that the most important relationship is the one with oneself, and that relationship requires space to breathe. To understand this preference, one must look at how different nervous systems process the world. Psychologists identify a trait called sensory processing sensitivity, the tendency to process stimuli more deeply and thoroughly. For individuals with this trait, the outside world arrives in high definition. Every conversation carries subtext. Every environment demands attention. Every social interaction requires processing layers most people don't register. This isn't weakness, it's a different operating system. While some nervous systems filter out ambient noise and emotional undercurrents, the highly sensitive system absorbs everything. A crowded restaurant isn't just loud, it's overwhelming. A busy office isn't just distracting, it's exhausting. Social gatherings aren't just tiring, they're depleting at a cellular level. The homebody learns early that recovery requires retreat, that depth of experience demands periods of withdrawal. Neuroscience reveals why home becomes essential for these individuals. The brain's default mode network, the neural system active during rest and reflection, requires downtime to function. This network processes experiences, consolidates memories, generates insights, and maintains sense of self. It cannot activate amid constant stimulation. For those who process deeply, this quiet neural work isn't optional, it's how they make sense of existence. Home becomes the space where this processing happens, where the noise stops long enough for thoughts to form, where the performance of personhood can pause, where the accumulated stimuli of the day can be digested. This is why the homebody often seems most themselves in their own space, because they finally can be. The masks drop, the vigilance relaxes, the real self emerges. But this pattern carries costs that others rarely see. There's the social currency lost, the networking opportunities missed, the spontaneous connections never made, the experiences not collected. There's the loneliness that sometimes arrives uninvited, the wondering if something is wrong with them for not wanting what others seem to need. There's the slow drift from friendships that require constant maintenance and the guilt that follows. Relationships suffer in particular ways. Partners who need social engagement feel neglected. Friends who measure connection by frequency feel abandoned. Family members who expect presence at every gathering feel rejected.
The homebody finds themselves perpetually negotiating between their needs and others' expectations, often sacrificing the former to preserve the latter. The cost accumulates quietly: resentment, exhaustion, the slow erosion of self.
Yet this same trait that complicates relationships also deepens them. The person who loves home has learned to be with themselves, a rare skill in an age of constant distraction. This capacity for solitude translates to presence. When they show up, they truly show up. Their attention isn't scattered across obligations and stimuli. They've learned that depth requires protection, that meaningful connection needs boundaries, that quality emerges from selectivity. The homebody often possesses gifts others don't recognize as gifts. Rich internal worlds where ideas develop slowly and completely. The ability to find contentment in simple things: a book, a window, an afternoon of uninterrupted thought. Creativity that emerges from boredom rather than stimulation. Self-knowledge that comes from spending time with the self rather than fleeing it. They notice what others miss because they've learned to pay attention. They create rather than consume because they've made space for creation. They know themselves because they've spent time in their own company. In an age of perpetual distraction, these are not small accomplishments. These are forms of resistance. The path forward isn't about becoming more social or forcing themselves into molds that don't fit. It's about understanding that preferences aren't pathologies, that introversion, or whatever combination of traits creates the homebody, isn't something to overcome. It's something to honor while remaining conscious of its costs. This means recognizing when home becomes cage rather than sanctuary, when preference becomes avoidance, when comfort becomes stagnation. The distinction lies in honesty. Are they home because it nourishes them or because the world terrifies them? Are they protecting their energy or hoarding it? Are they being selective or hiding? It means cultivating connections that honor their nature rather than demanding they deny it. Finding friends who understand that love isn't measured in hours spent together. Partners who respect that togetherness sometimes means parallel solitude. Communities that value depth over constant presence. These relationships exist. They require patience to find and courage to maintain boundaries within. It means designing lives that work with their wiring rather than against it. Careers that allow solitude. Schedules that include recovery time. Social lives built on quality rather than quantity. Living spaces crafted as true homes rather than places to crash between obligations. This is not selfishness. This is self-knowledge applied. And it means releasing the guilt that society imposes on those who don't perform extroversion. The homebody owes no one an explanation for how they recharge, where they find peace, what makes them feel alive. The cultural equation of social butterfly with emotional health is arbitrary at best, destructive at worst. Different nervous systems require different conditions. This is biology, not character flaw. Those who love staying home carry a particular wisdom, that home is not where you're trapped, but where you're found. That the journey inward is as valid as the journey outward. That presence doesn't require constant motion. That depth lives in the spaces between stimuli. That sometimes the most radical act is staying still. In a culture obsessed with doing, they've learned the art of being. In a world that demands constant availability, they've claimed the right to disappear. In an age that measures worth by visibility, they've discovered value in the unseen. This is not failure to launch. This is a different kind of flight, one that happens in the quiet corners of a life deliberately lived. The house is not a prison. It's a studio where the self is crafted, a laboratory where thoughts are tested, a sanctuary where the soul rests, a foundation from which everything meaningful emerges. Those who love staying home haven't withdrawn from life. They've simply found life waiting for them in the place they already were. And perhaps that's the deepest truth. Home is not a location, but a state of being.
It's the feeling of alignment between internal and external, the relief of authenticity, the peace that comes from accepting rather than fighting one's nature. Some find that feeling in movement in crowds. Others find it in stillness and solitude. Neither is superior. Both are necessary. Both are human. The world needs people who venture out, but it also needs people who know how to return, who understand that depth requires protected space, who model that it's possible to live fully without living loudly, who remind us that sometimes the most important adventure is the one that happens within. Thanks for watching. If this gave you real understanding, let me know in the comments. Which part hit hardest?